The stars shone cold and distant in the void of space, their light barely touching the shattered remains of a once thriving human colony. Amidst the floating wreckage, a small scout ship, codename Vanguard, drifted silently. The sleek ship was dwarfed by the massive Xerothix war cruiser hunting nearby. Every sound inside the Vanguard, a whisper, a beep from the control panel, seemed deafening against the backdrop of the oppressive silence. Captain Elena Dre sat rigid in the pilot's seat, her eyes scanning the holographic display before her. Her knuckles were white against the joystick as she navigated the ship cautiously through the debris field. The Vanguard stealth systems hummed faintly, masking their presence from the enemy ship, but Elena knew better than to rely on them completely. "Status report," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Still cloaked," murmured Ivy, the ship's AI specialist, her fingers dancing over a console. "But the Xerothix are scanning aggressively. If we move too fast or power up anything, they'll see us." Behind them, Bonner, the team's demolitions expert, strapped himself into a chair. His usual smirk was absent, replaced by a grim expression. "Can we hurry this up? Sitting out here feels like holding a lit grenade with no pin." Elena didn't respond. She was focused on the task at hand, scanning the ruins of the colony below for vital data. The Xerothix had obliterated this settlement mere days ago, leaving no survivors. This was no random act of violence, the aliens were methodical, eliminating human outposts one by one. The Vanguard's mission was clear: retrieve any information on the Xerothix's plans and make it back to the Unified Earth Federation, UEF. "Got it." Ivy's voice cut through the tension, tinged with both relief and dread. "Data downloaded. And... oh no." "What?" Elena asked sharply, her gaze snapping to Ivy. "The Xerothix aren't just attacking colonies. They're planning a synchronized strike on every human settlement across the galaxy. If we don't stop them, we're done." The weight of Ivy's words settled like a stone in the room. Even Bonner, usually the joker, looked stricken. Before anyone could respond, the ship's warning alarms blared. The display lit up with red markers as the Xerothix cruiser shifted direction. "They've spotted us," Ivy said, her voice trembling. Elena didn't hesitate. "Hang on." She slammed the thrusters, sending the Vanguard into a steep dive toward the planet below. The Xerothix cruiser fired a volley of plasma bolts, missing the scout ship by mere meters. Elena zigzagged through the debris, her focus razor-sharp as she evaded the enemy's attacks. The Vanguard's monitors showed the devastation unfolding on the surface. The Xerothix had begun a cloaked orbital bombardment, their energy blasts ripping through the remains of the colony. Clouds of ash and fire rose into the atmosphere, blotting out the stars. "We've got to warn the UEF," Elena shouted over the chaos. "Ivy, transmit the data now." "I'm trying." Ivy yelled, her hands flying over the console. "The Xerothix are jamming us. Give me a minute." "We don't have a minute." Bonner barked, gripping his seat as the ship shook violently. Elena pulled the ship into a sharp turn, narrowly avoiding another blast. The Vanguard's shields flickered under the strain. Sweat dripped down her forehead, but she kept her hands steady. She couldn't afford to panic, not now. "Data transmitted." Ivy finally cried out. Elena didn't waste a second. Initiating hyperspace jump. The ship's engines roared to life, and the stars outside blurred into streaks of light as the Vanguard leapt into hyperspace. A collective sigh of relief filled the cabin, but it was short-lived. A metallic thud echoed through the ship. What was that? The small spaceship, Argonaut, drifted through the vast emptiness of space, its engines humming softly in the stillness. On the bridge, the crew members were unusually quiet, their faces tense, eyes scanning the darkness beyond. Captain Sarah Quinn stood by the viewport, looking out into the cold void. She had been to many dangerous sectors, but this one, the Aldraxis system, felt different. The quiet was oppressive, as if something was watching them. "Captain," said Lieutenant Carter, his voice a little too loud in the silence, "we're entering Yverac's territory." Sarah glanced back at him, her expression unreadable. "I know," she replied, her voice low but firm. "Stay alert. We don't know what's waiting for us here." The Yveracs, a brutal and nearly mythical predator species, were known throughout the galaxy for their ferocity. They were feared even by the strongest races in the universe. Legend said that their ships were cloaked, their weapons devastating, and their hunger for destruction insatiable. In this part of space, it was no longer safe to even whisper their name. As the Argonaut passed through the dense asteroid field, a heavy sense of dread settled over the crew. Every noise, every flicker of the ship's lights, felt amplified. The comms were silent, and no ships had been in contact for days. This was a dead zone. Then, without warning, the scanners beeped to life. The screen flashed, showing an incoming object, fast, moving with the precision of a predator hunting its prey. "Captain," Carter said, his hand trembling slightly as he pointed to the screen. It's a Yverac's ship." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Their worst nightmare was materializing right in front of them. A stealth ship. The Yveracs were experts at staying hidden, striking without warning. They could cloak themselves so perfectly that even the most advanced sensors couldn't detect them until it was too late. "We've been detected," Sarah muttered. "Brace yourselves." Before the crew could respond, the Argonaut shook violently. The impact of the first blast sent crew members stumbling across the floor. Alarms blared as the ship's defensive systems struggled to respond. The Yveracs had found them. The enemy had struck first, using weapons that cut through their shields like they were paper. "Damage report." Captain Quinn shouted, grabbing onto the side of the control panel. Her voice was calm but edged with panic. "Shields down to 40%, Captain," reported Chief Engineer Tomlins, his face pale but determined. "Hull integrity, holding for now, but the engines are taking damage. We won't be able to outrun them." The ship rocked again. More blasts. This time, the force was even stronger. Something deep in the hull groaned and cracked. The lights flickered, and then the entire control room went dark for a split second, only to return to life as the emergency lights kicked on. Status of weapon. "We've got nothing, Captain," said Carter, his voice cracking with frustration. "Our weapons systems are offline. We're defenseless." Another explosion rattled the ship, and the crew barely held on. Sarah's mind raced. The Yveracs were not like other enemies, they didn't just conquer, they hunted, they relished in the destruction. They wanted to break you, body and spirit. The Argonaut wasn't equipped to deal with this. There was no way they could survive a direct fight. "Focus!" Sarah shouted, rallying the crew. "Get us into the asteroid field, now. Maybe we can lose them in the rocks." But it was already too late. The Yverac ship had disabled their engines, and as the crew tried desperately to regain control, another blast hit directly in the center of the ship, sending sparks flying. "Captain!" Carter shouted in panic, staring at the screens. "It's too strong, we can't outrun them." There was no escape. Sarah's mind raced through all the options, but the truth was inescapable. They were outmatched. The Yveracs were not just powerful, they were calculating. Every move had been planned from the moment they entered this system. Suddenly, a new sound broke through the chaos, a static-filled signal on the comms. Sarah barely heard it at first, then she focused, trying to decipher the words. It was a distress message, but not from the Argonaut. It was coming from somewhere else. "This is Captain Voss, reporting from the Odyssey. We've lost, they're coming for Earth. The Yveracs, they're coming for Earth." The signal cut off abruptly, swallowed by static. The words hit Captain Quinn like a punch to the gut. They're coming for Earth. The realization hit her like a wave. The Iverax weren't just here for them. They were here for Earth, humanity's home. Everything she had fought for, every sacrifice, everything she'd hoped to protect, was now in grave danger. All crew to battle stations. Sarah ordered, her voice cold and firm. She knew that, against all odds, Earth's fate was about to change forever. We're not going down without a fight. Prepare for evasive maneuvers. And get me everything we can on the Iverax. We need a plan, and we need it now. The crew scrambled, working together like a well-oiled machine, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of dread that gripped her heart. The Iverax were here. They were hunting them. And this time, there would be no easy way out. Back on Earth, the news of the attack spread like wildfire. The Galactic Defense Council, an alliance of the universe's most powerful forces, gathered in a highly secure command center located deep beneath the surface of the planet. The massive room was filled with representatives from various races, their faces filled with concern. The air was thick with tension, and the flashing red lights across the walls added to the urgency. The worst possible scenario was unfolding right before their eyes. Admiral Sarah Kent's face was displayed on the center's holoscreen. She appeared calm, but even the most experienced soldiers could see the grim determination behind her eyes. She wasn't one to show fear, but this was a fight no one was prepared for. Earth is now directly under threat, Admiral Kent spoke, her voice steady, but sharp. The Iverax fleet is on its way. We need to act quickly, but we're running out of time. Around her, other council members exchanged glances. Some were already shaking their heads. It's impossible, a representative from the Zorith species said, his voice hoarse with disbelief. The Iverax are not just advanced, they're predators. Their technology is light years ahead of anything we've seen. No fleet, not even our best, can stand up to them. Another council member, a human general, added grimly, their ships are cloaked, their weapons cut through shields like they're nothing. We've already lost Mars. Our defense. Admiral Kent's fingers tightened around the armrest of her chair as she listened to the pessimism fill the room. She knew it wasn't an easy fight. The Iverax had cloaking devices that made them nearly invisible to the most advanced scanners. They could strike without warning, retreat without a trace, and their weapons could destroy a planet's surface in a matter of hours. They were feared across the galaxy for their brutal tactics and merciless nature. But what the Council didn't understand, what they were missing, was that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their tech or their firepower. It was in their resilience, their refusal to give up. We don't have the luxury of fear, Admiral Kent said, cutting through the chatter. Her words were firm, cutting, but they had a sense of urgency. We've faced extinction before, and we've survived. We're not going to sit here and wait for them to wipe us out. I say we fight. We must. She looked at the Council, their doubtful expressions turning toward her as she continued. We have to move quickly. The Iverax are coming. We don't know exactly when they'll reach Earth, but we know they're coming. And when they do, we need a plan. Her voice carried a weight that made everyone fall silent. They couldn't deny that she was right. The Iverax had already wiped out Mars' defense systems. Earth would be next if they didn't act. Even if humanity had no chance of winning, they had to try. The Council was faced with a decision: either take the risk of fighting, or surrender without a fight. I'll have my best minds working on new weapons, General Harris from the Jovian Alliance said reluctantly. But I need to be honest, Admiral. Their cloaking technology is beyond anything we've ever studied. And their weapons, their ships, nothing we have will be able to stop them. Admiral Kent nodded grimly. She'd heard it all before. We're the underdogs, she said quietly, but that's not the first time we've been underestimated, is it? We've survived wars with species much stronger than us. We've fought back when the odds were against us. She looked around the room. Humans don't give up. We fight. A brief silence followed as the room digested her words. She was right. Earth's history was full of moments where humanity had been told they were too weak, too small, too unprepared. Yet here they were, still standing. They were survivors, fighters, and no one was going to take that away from them. But Admiral Kent wasn't blind to the odds. She knew how severe the situation was. Even as she spoke with confidence, a knot of dread twisted in her stomach. The Yveraks weren't just enemies, they were unstoppable predators. What if they couldn't stop them this time? What if Earth was doomed? The very thought was unbearable. Admiral, another voice spoke up. This one was from a diplomat, the representative of the Gentry species, a race of peaceful but technologically advanced beings. If we engage them, the losses will be catastrophic. Our fleets are not equipped to fight something like this. We'd be throwing our soldiers into the fire for no reason. There's always a reason to fight, Admiral Kent replied, her voice unwavering. She stood tall, a symbol of resolve. If we don't, then we lose everything. Our families, our homes, our future. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. We don't fight because we expect to win. We fight because it's the only choice we have. As the meeting continued, the air became heavier with the reality of the situation. The council agreed on one thing: the Yveraks had to be stopped. But how? It was a question that no one had the answer to. The next few hours were filled with frantic communication. Reports from every corner of the Earth came in, detailing the growing panic as citizens tried to prepare for the worst. But there was little they could do. The Yveraks were too fast, too brutal. No amount of preparation could prevent what was coming. At the same time, Admiral Kent reached out to her most trusted officers and strategists. The world's brightest minds, those who had studied the Yveraks and their terrifying tactics. It was clear, they needed to figure out their weaknesses. And fast. There had to be something, anything, that could be used against them. News arrived that the Yveraks fleet had started its journey towards Earth. It would take them a few weeks, but the countdown had begun. Humanity had no time to waste. As the meeting drew to a close, Admiral Kent stared at the holomap of Earth's defenses. The only thing she could count on now was humanity's spirit. We're the underdogs, she muttered to herself. But that's when we're at our best. The Yveraks fleet was coming fast. Humanity's last hope to delay the incoming assault was Mars, Earth's closest colony, with its advanced defense systems. But even Mars wasn't prepared for the full might of the Yveraks. On the surface of Mars, the skies were a deadly mix of red dust and smoke. The colony's defense teams scrambled, activating high-tech drones and experimental weapons. The sound of anti-aircraft fire filled the air as soldiers rushed into their positions. The Yveraks fleet was nearly here, and the humans on Mars had to buy Earth some time to prepare for the inevitable. In the heart of the colony, Captain Joshua Bonner stood in the command center, watching the incoming ships on the massive screen. He was young, but his face was hardened by years of combat. A veteran of many battles, Bonner had seen enough to know that this fight was not one they could win, but they had no choice but to try. They had to buy Earth time. Every second mattered. "Captain," a voice called out from the operations table. "The Yveraks fleet is entering Mars orbit. They've begun deploying their cloaked ships, our defenses are being overrun." Bonner's jaw tightened. He knew the situation was dire. Even with their best tech, even with the most advanced weaponry humanity had, the Yveraks were simply too powerful. Their ships were too fast, too deadly. Every countermeasure the humans had was useless against the Yveraks' stealth capabilities. "We need to hit them first," Bonner said, his voice full of urgency. "Deploy all drones, and activate the experimental ion cannons. We may not be able to stop them, but we can slow them down." The sky above Mars became a battlefield. High-tech drones streaked across the sky, weaving through the atmosphere to engage the Everax ships. The first few shots from the drones hit their targets, but the Everax ships were too quick. Their cloaking technology made it almost impossible to get a clear shot. The drones were picked off one by one, the skies filling with flashes of light as the Everax retaliated with their brutal firepower. Damn it! Bonner cursed as he watched the situation unfold. The drones were being destroyed faster than they could deploy them. Mars' defenses, powerful as they were, weren't enough. The Everax had too many ships, too many weapons. The colony was about to fall. He looked around the command center, his mind racing. He had to make a choice, one that would cost him everything. But it was the only way. Bonner turned to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Davis. "Get me the coordinates for the Everax flagship," he said, his voice steady despite the panic rising around him. "Captain, are you?" "Just do it, Davis." Bonner cut him off. "We don't have time to waste." Davis hesitated for a moment but then quickly complied, typing the coordinates into the system. Bonner took a deep breath and tapped his communication device. "This is Captain Bonner. Prepare my ship for launch. I'm going in." There was a brief silence, then Davis spoke, his voice tight with concern. "Captain, you can't do this. If you go in, you'll never make it back. The Everax are too strong." Bonner's face hardened as he grabbed his jacket and walked towards the hangar. "I know. But we don't have any other options. This is the only way to take out their flagship and slow them down. I'll make sure they remember what happens when they mess with humanity." In the hangar, Bonner's ship, the Pioneer, was prepped and ready for launch. The ship wasn't equipped to engage in direct battle with the Everax, it was a scout ship, built for speed and reconnaissance. But Bonner had a plan. A desperate one, but one that might just give Earth the time it needed. The crew of the Pioneer watched in silence as Bonner climbed into the cockpit. He gave them a final salute before sealing the hatch. "Good luck, Captain," Davis said over the comms. Bonner didn't answer. There was no time for goodbyes. The Pioneer shot into the sky, streaking towards the Everax flagship. Bonner's heart pounded in his chest, but his mind was focused. His ship was small, fast, but fragile. His only chance was to get close enough to the flagship and self-destruct, taking down as much. As the Pioneer closed in on the Everax ship, Bonner's targeting system locked onto the massive warship. The Everax had no idea he was coming. The ship's cloaking systems kept it hidden, but Bonner had learned their patterns. He knew exactly where they would be. "Here goes nothing," Bonner muttered to himself as he pushed the ship to its limit. The Pioneer was fast, dodging incoming blasts from the Everax as it flew into the heart of the enemy fleet. The flagship loomed ahead, its massive size almost overwhelming. Bonner's pulse quickened as he reached the perfect range. With a final look at the screen, he pressed the button. The ship's systems flashed red, warning lights screaming at him, but it was too late to turn back now. The Pioneer detonated in a massive explosion, a blinding light engulfing the flagship. The force of the blast sent shockwaves through the Everax fleet, and the flagship broke apart, pieces of the massive ship spiraling into space. For a brief moment, the battle slowed. The Everax flagship was gone, and the fleet was disoriented. Humanity had struck back, but at a terrible cost. Back on Mars, the defenders watched in awe and horror as the explosion lit up the sky. Bonner's sacrifice had worked. The Everax fleet was momentarily thrown off balance. But the cost of the victory was heavy. The remaining Everax ships quickly regrouped and retaliated with overwhelming force. Mars' defenses couldn't hold for much longer. Bonner's death was a bitter blow, both emotionally and strategically. His crew, his friends, had lost a hero. And now, humanity was facing an enemy that would not stop until they were wiped out. But his final act had given Earth a chance. And that was something humanity could not take for granted. The battle for Mars had ended, but the war was far from over. Humanity was on the brink of annihilation. The Yverax fleet was relentless, and every day they grew closer to Earth. The loss of Mars had sent shockwaves through every corner of Earth, but even in the face of despair, humanity refused to give up. Deep underground, hidden in the darkest corners of Earth's remaining research facilities, a team of scientists worked day and night, desperately trying to find a way to fight back. The world's greatest minds were gathered in a secret research lab led by Dr. Eli Winters, a brilliant scientist and one of the few who had studied Yverax technology. His lab was a place of hope and fear, filled with the hum of machines, flashing lights, and the quiet murmur of AI systems. Dr. Winters paced back and forth, staring at holographic screens that displayed endless streams of data about the Yverax. His eyes were tired, his face drawn from the pressure, but there was no time for rest. His team was running out of time. The Yverax were coming, and Earth's defenses were nothing compared to their advanced technology. "Doctor, we have something," said one of his lead researchers, a young woman named Diar. Lisa Sue. She was staring at a screen, her eyes wide with disbelief. "We found a way to exploit their bioarmor." Dr. Winters quickly moved to her side. The screen showed the complicated nanostructures of the Yverax bioarmor, a nearly indestructible layer that covered their soldiers and ships. It was one of their greatest advantages, nothing could penetrate it. But now, Dr. Sue was showing a breakthrough. "It's like their bioarmor is designed to interact with nanites," Dr. Sue explained. "If we can inject a specific nanite sequence into their systems, it could destabilize their armor, rendering it useless." Dr. Winters leaned over the screen, his mind racing. "How soon can we get this into production? And more importantly, how do we deliver it to them?" "We're working on a drone system to inject the nanites directly into their bioarmor," Dr. Sue replied. "It's still in the prototype stage, but we have a working model." The news was a glimmer of hope. The Yverax had been unbeatable because of their nearly invulnerable armor, but now there was a chance to turn the tide. Still, there was more to be done. Dr. Winters turned his attention to another project, one that had been in development for weeks, an EMP wave capable of disrupting the Yverax cloaking devices. The cloaking technology allowed them to strike without warning, making them nearly impossible to defend against. Without it, they would be vulnerable. "We've got it," said another scientist, a man named Dr. Samir Patel. "The EMP device is ready. It'll emit a frequency that will disrupt their cloaking tech, making them visible and vulnerable to our weapons." "Good," Winters said, nodding in approval. "We need to launch it before they arrive. But we don't have much time." The lab was filled with a tense energy as the scientists worked together, pooling all of Earth's remaining resources into these two breakthrough technologies. They knew it was their only shot. But making these weapons required resources that Earth couldn't afford to waste. People in the lab looked nervously at the dwindling power sources and raw materials. Every piece of tech they built pushed Earth closer to running out of supplies. It was a gamble. Back in the command center, Admiral Sarah Kent was preparing for the hardest speech of her life. The mood across the planet had shifted from one of panic to desperate determination. People had lost loved ones on Mars, and many feared the worst. But Kent knew that fear could not win this fight. She had seen what humanity was capable of when they fought together. The pressure weighed heavily on her shoulders as she stood before a gathering of military leaders and representatives from across the globe. This was no longer just about military strategy, it was about hope. She needed to inspire them. She cleared her throat and began, her voice strong and filled with purpose. "We've been brought to the edge of extinction, but we're still here. We stand together as one, united, not just as soldiers, but as humans. We've always been the underdogs, but we've always fought back. We may not have the same firepower as the Iverax, but we have something they don't. We have heart. We have determination. We will not go quietly into the night. She paused, letting her words sink in. Dr. Winters and his team have given us a chance, a real chance, to defeat them. Their technology, our weapons, they're a game changer. But we need to act now. We have no time to waste. We have to give everything we have to protect our world, our families, our future. Kent's voice grew louder, more passionate. This is not just about survival. This is about proving that humanity can rise, even when the odds are against us. The Iverax think they can crush us, but they've underestimated the one thing we have that they can't take away, our spirit. Our will to fight. The room fell silent as the weight of her words hit home. There was no turning back now. Earth had thrown everything into these new technologies. The future of humanity was resting on this desperate plan. Kent's words had sparked something in the room, hope. And that was the spark they needed. Outside the command center, soldiers prepared for battle. The EMP wave was ready, the nanites were being deployed, and the final stage of the plan was in motion. Humanity was going to. Admiral Kent stood tall, her face filled with resolve. Let's show the Iverax what it means to face the last hope of humanity. The battle was about to shift. Humanity's desperate hope rested on a single, daring plan, a trap that would lure the Iverax fleet into the heart of the solar system. The plan was risky, but it was humanity's only shot at turning the tide. The leaders of Earth, along with the finest military strategists, had decided on a bold move. They would bring the Iverax fleet to Jupiter's orbit, where Earth's forces would be waiting. The idea was to use Jupiter's powerful gravitational field to slow down the Iverax ships and create the perfect environment for the ambush. The moment had to be precise. If they missed the timing, the Iverax would tear through Earth's defenses in an instant. In the secret military command center, Admiral Sarah Kent and Dr. Eli Winters stood side by side, watching the holographic display of the Iverax fleet's approach. The plan was about to begin, and the tension was palpable. "We can't afford any mistakes," Kent said, her voice steady but filled with pressure. "Once we disrupt their cloaking devices, the Iverax will know we're here. We need to hit them hard before they can retaliate." Dr. Winters nodded, his face serious. "The nanite weapons are ready. We've programmed the drones to target their bioarmor directly. If we can pierce through their defenses, we might be able to take out their ships one by one." The operation was about to begin. The trap is set. As the Iverax fleet approached Jupiter, a fleet of human ships, small but fast, positioned themselves within the gas giant's orbit. The plan was to use the gas clouds as cover, hiding their movements from the enemy. With the cloaking disruption system activated, Earth's ships would remain invisible until the perfect moment. In the distance, the Iverax ships loomed. The large fleet entered Jupiter's orbit, confident and unaware of the trap. It was then that the humans made their move. The first wave of human drones shot forward, releasing pulses that disrupted the Iverax cloaking technology. Suddenly, the vast fleet of Iverax ships was visible to the human forces for the first time in the battle. The Iverax had no idea what hit them. They had relied on their stealth and overwhelming numbers, but now, they were exposed. The skies above Jupiter lit up as humanity's forces launched a full assault. The specially designed drones equipped with nanite injectors rushed forward. The nanites targeted the Iverax bioarmor, injecting the deadly nanites directly into the ships. The effect was immediate. A Iverax warship, once invulnerable, began to shudder and break apart. Its bioarmor, now destabilized, couldn't protect it. The ship exploded in a brilliant flash, and the Iverax fleet was thrown into chaos. For the first time in this war, the Iverax suffered a noticeable loss. The humans had struck a blow, and it felt like victory was within reach. But just as the humans began to celebrate their success, the Yverax retaliated with terrifying speed and precision. Their massive warships turned, their weapons flashing as they unleashed a barrage of laser fire that tore through the human fleet. The Yverax had been caught off guard, but they were not going down without a fight. The ambush had worked, but the cost was steep. The Yverax's retaliation was devastating. Humanity's ships, small and fragile compared to the enemy's firepower, began to disintegrate under the overwhelming barrage. Explosions ripped through the fleet, and the survivors were forced to scatter to avoid complete destruction. In the midst of this chaos, a young pilot named Lieutenant Mark Donovan found himself in the heart of the fight. He had been training for this moment his entire life, but he had never imagined it would come down to this. The Yverax were relentless, and his ship was outmatched. As the battle raged around him, Donovan's comms crackled to life. "Lieutenant, we need you to hold the line. We can't afford to lose any more ships." He gripped the controls of his fighter, his knuckles white with tension. He knew that the fate of the mission depended on him now. His squadron was scattered, and the Yverax were closing in. The young pilot's heart raced, but his resolve was clear. "I won't let them take us down," he muttered to himself. In a stunning maneuver, Donovan activated his ship's cloaking device, darting behind one of the larger Yverax ships. His target was their command center. If he could destroy it, the fleet would lose its coordination, giving humanity a chance to regroup. He flew at breakneck speed, dodging laser fire from the Yverax and maneuvering through the wreckage of destroyed ships. The feeling of adrenaline coursed through him as he lined up his shot. With a deep breath, he fired. The blast hit its mark, sending a Yverax ship into a tailspin. It exploded, taking out several other ships in the process. For a moment, the battle slowed, as the Yverax struggled to recover from the unexpected loss. Donovan's gamble had paid off. But as he pulled away, the enemy fleet retaliated with a concentrated blast, hitting his ship and sending it spiraling toward Jupiter's atmosphere. He barely had time to eject before his ship disintegrated in the intense heat. His sacrifice had given humanity a fighting chance. His final act was one of pure heroism, a moment that would be remembered for years to come. His death was a heavy blow to his comrades, but his courage had inspired them to push forward. The aftermath. In the aftermath of the ambush, the Yverax fleet was thrown into disarray. They had suffered a loss, one that they had not anticipated. But despite the success of the ambush, humanity's forces were badly weakened. The Yverax were not finished. They would regroup and retaliate, and Earth still had a long, hard fight ahead of it. The ambush was a pivotal moment in the war, showing that humanity could strike back against the invincible Yverax. But it was also a reminder of the high cost of war. Every victory came with a price. As the battle continued, the question remained, could humanity survive long enough to turn the tide, or would the Yverax overwhelm them in the end? The Yverax fleet had arrived at Earth's doorstep, bringing with them the full force of their wrath. After weeks of battle, the endgame had come. The final assault had begun. Earth's last defense was about to be tested to its absolute limit. It was a two-front war. Above the planet, in space, humanity's last surviving ships were preparing for the final battle. On the ground, in cities and towns across Earth, civilians and soldiers alike were ready to face the invaders head-on. There was no more hiding. There was no more retreat. This was it. The last stand. Space battle, the Resolute's last stand. In the vastness of space, Admiral Sarah Kent stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Resolute. It was humanity's final line of defense. The Yverax were closing in fast, their massive warships surrounding Earth's orbit. Kent knew they had no hope of winning without a miracle, but she wasn't about to let her people go down without a fight. "Ready the weapons, full power to the shields," Kent ordered. Her voice was calm, but her hands trembled. This was the moment she had been preparing for, and she would not let her crew fail. The Resolute had been through many battles, but this was the most critical one. She knew her ship, like the rest of humanity's fleet, was outmatched. But the Iverax had underestimated the willpower of humanity. They were about to find out just how powerful that will could be. The Resolute fired its weapons, unleashing a barrage of plasma and missiles that streaked toward the enemy. The Iverax ships retaliated with devastating firepower. The space around Earth became a chaotic battlefield of flashing lights, explosions, and the crackling of energy shields. Every moment felt like the final seconds of a dying star, but the Resolute held on, its crew fighting with everything they had. Admiral Kent's face was determined. "We hold the line, no matter what. Humanity's future depends on us. Ground battle, humanity's last stand." On Earth's surface, the situation was equally dire. Cities across the globe had been evacuated, but the Iverax were still ruthless in their assault. Their ground forces were unstoppable, with their cloaking devices making them nearly invisible to human eyes. The Iverax soldiers advanced through the streets, tearing apart buildings and overwhelming. But humanity fought back. Soldiers, civilians, and anyone who could hold a weapon had joined the fight. They used everything they had, makeshift weapons, firepower from Earth's defense stations, and any piece of tech they could salvage. The streets were filled with the sound of gunfire, explosions, and the cries of both fear and determination. Sergeant Ella Carter, a veteran soldier, led a squad through the ruins of a city. Her heart pounded in her chest, and sweat poured down her face as she took cover behind a fallen building. Her squad had been outnumbered for days, but they kept pushing forward, fighting every step of the way. "We can't let them win," Sergeant Carter shouted to her troops as she led them through the chaos. "We protect this city. We protect Earth." But the Iverax soldiers were relentless. They moved with deadly precision, picking off soldiers one by one. It wasn't just the soldiers who were at risk. Civilians, too, were caught in the crossfire. The once thriving streets were now a battleground. But despite the overwhelming odds, humanity stood firm. They fought with everything they had. The heroic moment, near death and hope. Back in space, the Resolute was taking a beating. The Iverax fleet had overwhelmed much of humanity's remaining ships. The Resolute's shields were failing, and the enemy was closing in for the final blow. Admiral Kent stood at her post, eyes narrowed, unwilling to let the end come without one last attempt. Then, a sudden realization struck her, a message. Dr. Eli Winters had completed the final EMP device. It was ready. "Admiral Kent, the EMP is set to launch. It's our only chance," Winters' voice came through the comms. "We can disable the Iverax fleet systems, but we'll need to deliver the strike directly to their central command ship." Kent's eyes flashed with determination. "Prepare the device. I'll get it there." As the Resolute took a massive hit from an enemy blast, Kent was thrown to the ground. She struggled to stay conscious, but the pain was overwhelming. The Iverax were so close to victory. But then, through sheer force of will, she pushed herself up. There was no time to waste. She stumbled to the launch bay, where the EMP device was waiting. The ship was listing, smoke and debris filling the air. She could barely hear over the roaring alarms, but her focus was laser-sharp. Kent climbed into a fighter ship, preparing to take the EMP directly into the heart of the Iverax fleet. Her body ached, and her vision blurred, but she didn't stop. She knew this mission was the only hope left for humanity. She had to deliver the final blow. The final strike, victory through sacrifice. The EMP device was armed and ready. Kent flew her fighter directly toward the massive Iverax command ship. Enemy fire streaked past her, narrowly missing her ship, but she pushed through. Her hands gripped the controls, sweat dripping from her brow. She saw the enemy ship loom ahead, its massive weapons primed for the killing strike. But Kent's resolve was stronger than ever. She guided her ship into position and fired the EMP directly into the command ship's core. The resulting explosion lit up the dark expanse of space. The Yverax ships suddenly fell into disarray. Their systems were down, their cloaking devices disabled, and their coordination lost. The Yverax were vulnerable. Humanity's final strike had succeeded. But it had come at a cost. Kent's fighter was caught in the blast, her ship crippled as debris tore through it. With her heart racing, she ejected from the cockpit just before the explosion consumed everything. She floated in space, unconscious but alive, as Earth's forces took advantage of the chaos and launched their final assault. On the ground, the Yverax were reeling. Without their fleet's coordination, the soldiers were scattered and disorganized. Humanity's forces surged forward, pushing the invaders back. The final victory. The Yverax fleet was annihilated. The EMP and nanite strikes had destroyed their command ship, and their forces were in disarray. With the final blow delivered, humanity had won, but it was a victory. Admiral Kent awoke in a recovery pod, her body bruised and battered, but the battle was over. Earth had been saved, but the cost was high. As she looked out at the blue planet below, she knew that humanity had proven something important. No matter how overwhelming the odds, they would never give up. The war had ended. The Yverax were defeated, their fleet shattered, their forces scattered. The Earth had held strong, but the victory came at a tremendous cost. The price of freedom was steep, and as the dust settled, humanity was left to mourn the billions who had given their lives to protect their world. Humanity had shown incredible resilience. It was a testament to their determination, their spirit, and their willingness to sacrifice everything to survive. As the survivors looked at the ruins of battle, both in space and on the ground, they knew that they had won, but it was a hollow victory. So much had been lost. The announcement of victory. News of the victory spread across Earth, but it was not a time for celebration. Leaders and citizens alike grieved for those they had lost. The victory was bittersweet. The soldiers, the civilians, the families who had been torn apart, they would never return. The global communications system broadcasted a message from Admiral Sarah Kent, who had survived the battle and now stood as a symbol of humanity's strength. Her voice echoed across the planet, a voice of both sorrow and pride. Today, we mourn the loss of billions. Fathers, mothers, children, comrades. They gave their lives so that humanity could survive. But in their sacrifice, we found our strength. We didn't just defend Earth. We fought for our future. We fought for the galaxy's future. And we won. The Yverax are no more, and Earth stands as a beacon of hope. We are the survivors. We are the victors. The words were simple, but the weight of them was felt by every listener. The universe had been forced to reckon with humanity's power, their ability to adapt, to fight, and to persevere. No longer would Earth be dismissed as weak or insignificant. The galaxy's recognition. In the wake of the battle, Earth's victory did not go unnoticed. Alien species that had once looked down on humanity, dismissing them as primitive or weak, now saw the truth. The Yverax, the most feared predators in the galaxy, had been brought down by human ingenuity, bravery, and sheer willpower. Other species could no longer ignore Earth's potential. At first, they were hesitant. The Yverax had been the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known, and no one had expected humanity to survive, let alone defeat them. But as time passed, the galaxy began to recognize Earth as a new force to be reckoned with. Earth had proven itself as a capable and powerful ally, one that had stood up to the greatest terror the universe had ever known. Ambassadors from other alien civilizations approached Earth, offering their support and alliance. They extended their hands in peace, acknowledging humanity's place in the galaxy. Earth was no longer a small, insignificant planet in a corner of the universe. It was now seen as a rising power, one that could shape the future of the galaxy. Humanity's reflection, a new identity. In the quiet aftermath of the battle, Admiral Sarah Kent found herself alone on the observation deck of the Resolute. The stars were calm, the space surrounding Earth peaceful, but in her mind, the war was still raging. She thought of the lives lost, of the heroes who had given everything. As the weight of the victory settled in, she allowed herself a moment of reflection. She thought about how far humanity had come, from the brink of extinction to standing at the forefront of the galaxy. "We didn't want to be predators," she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible in the silence. "But when the universe gave us no choice, we became the deadliest of them all." It wasn't a statement of pride, but of understanding. Humanity had been forced into a corner. They had been pushed to fight, to adapt, to survive. And in doing so, they had become more than just a species struggling for survival. They had become warriors. For the first time in human history, Earth was no longer the prey in the cosmic game. They had proven they could face the most terrifying of enemies and come out victorious. But Kent knew that this victory, while sweet, also marked the beginning of something new. A new era. A hopeful new beginning. The war had changed humanity. It had forced them to look at themselves in a new way. They were no longer just inhabitants of Earth, they were now part of something much larger. They had a place in the galaxy, and they would no longer be afraid to defend it. The galaxy, once a place of uncertainty and danger, now seemed full of potential. The surviving members of Earth's forces were determined to ensure that no other species would ever threaten their home again. Earth's military was stronger than ever, and the combined resources of the world were being used to rebuild what had been lost and prepare for whatever challenges lay ahead. Humanity's resilience had been tested, and they had passed the ultimate test. Their willpower and adaptability had won them the respect of the galaxy. Now, Earth was ready to face the future, not as a vulnerable species, but as one that would fight for its survival, and for the survival of others. As Admiral Kent stood on the observation deck, she looked out at the stars, a small, peaceful smile playing on her lips. The battle had been won, but the real work was just beginning. The universe was vast, and there were many unknowns waiting out there. But one thing was clear, humanity was ready. The end of the beginning. The story of humanity's survival, its battle against the Everax, and its rise as a new power in the galaxy had come to an end. But the journey was far from over. The future was bright, and Earth was now prepared to face whatever challenges the galaxy might throw at them. Humanity had been tested, and it had survived. And in that survival, they had forged a new identity. They were no longer just survivors. They were warriors, leaders, and allies in the ever-expanding universe. They had proven that they would not just survive, they would thrive. The final words of the message echoed in the minds of all who heard it, a promise